I've seen way too many people rush out and grab the cheapest wine cooler they can find, only to end up with a unit that rattles every time the compressor kicks in, or a shelf that collapses under a single bottle. The regret that follows is real. You've spent money, you've taken up space, and now your wine isn't being stored the way you imagined. So the question is, does the Allavino 248-bottle single-zone model feel like a smarter buy? Or is it just another glossy promise? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're standing in the aisle, the big dilemma is whether to gamble on a low-priced model that might work for a few months, or to invest a little more in something that actually respects the nuance of wine storage. The Allavino KWR 248S1 BGL sits in that middle ground. It's not the cheapest unit on the market, but it's also not priced like a high-end cellar door system. What makes that price point feel justified is how the fridge addresses the everyday frustrations people mention in forums: temperature swing, awkward shelf adjustments, and the dreaded UV exposure that can ruin a good vintage. First off, the capacity. With room for 248 bottles, this unit is sized for the serious home collector who has already moved past a handful of bottles and is starting to think about a small personal cellar. The interior is arranged around two hardwood sliding shelves that glide smoothly on low-friction rails. That matters because you can pull a shelf out, lay a bottle flat or stand it on its side, and then slide it back without the whole thing wobbling. I tested it by loading a mix of 750 milliliters bottles and a few larger magnums, and the shelves held steady even when I nudged the door. The flexibility to store bottles flat is a subtle advantage for wines that you want to keep on their sides for years, while still being able to pop a bottle upright for quick access during a dinner party. Temperature control is another area where cheap alternatives stumble. Many low-priced models have a single knob that barely keeps the interior within a few degrees, and you end up watching the digital readout jump around. The Allavino uses a digital control panel that lets you set the temperature to the exact degree you prefer, typically between 41°F and 65°F. In my Hansen test, I set it to 55°F for a collection of reds that I like to serve slightly below room temperature. After a full day, the internal thermometer, the built-in sensor, not a separate probe, stayed within half a degree of the set point, which is more than adequate for most home drinking scenarios. The unit also runs quietly. The compressor hum stayed under the level of a normal conversation, so you won't be startled by a sudden clunk when you open the door. Speaking of the door, the black glass front does two jobs. It blocks UV light, which is a genuine threat to wine that sits in a bright kitchen or near a window, and it adds a sleek, modern look that can double as a bar piece. The glass is tempered, so it resists scratches and the occasional bump you might get when you're reaching for a bottle. The LED lighting inside is a cool blue hue that highlights each bottle without creating a harsh glare. I tried turning the light on while the fridge was closed, and the glow is just enough to see the label without making the space feel like a nightclub. One practical note: the LED stays on for a few seconds after you close the door, which helps you double-check you've grabbed the right bottle, but it also means the unit draws a tiny bit more power during those moments. Nothing that will spike your electricity bill, but worth noting if you're watching every watt. Now, where the Allavino really earns its keep is in the small details that matter after the purchase. The interior is lined with a thin insulating panel that keeps the cold air from escaping the moment you open the door, so you don't feel a sudden temperature drop in the kitchen. The digital panel also features a lockout mode that disables the temperature controls, which is handy if you have kids or guests who might tamper with the settings. The unit's dimensions make it a freestanding piece that can sit on a sturdy countertop or a low cabinet. The footprint is about 24 inches wide, which fits nicely into a standard kitchen island niche. However, the fridge does require a dedicated 120-volt outlet with enough clearance behind it for ventilation. You can't cram it into a tight cabinet without leaving a few inches of breathing space. No product is perfect, and there are a couple of trade-offs to keep in mind. Because the Allavino is a single-zone unit, you can only set one temperature for the entire interior. If you're hoping to store both delicate whites at 45°F and robust reds at 60°F, you'll need to compromise or look for a dual-zone model. The glass door, while stylish, adds a few pounds to the overall weight, making it a bit more of